Biblical Moses and UFO disclosure have so much in common. That is, if we take an optimistic view of the ontological stalemate. Before we go deeper down the path and follow the white rabbit, I want to share an excerpt from my paper titled UFOs Built the Cover-Up, which clearly defines what the ontological stalemate is. And I quote, "The ontological stalemate. Our civilization is stuck in an ontological stalemate, a deliberately engineered scenario saturated by credible testimonies, government secrecy, anomalous events, and compelling accounts. This saturation has led many to strongly suspect or even firmly believe that non-human intelligence is actively engaging with our world. Yet, we remain deprived of definitive smoking gun evidence, meticulously concealed by governments, militaries, and aerospace corporations. This engineered scenario generates profound existential tension. It allows society to selectively choose its own version of reality, either believing we're not alone based on overwhelming anecdotal and indirect evidence, or comfortably dismissing it all as hoaxes, lies, or misidentifications due to the lack of publicly verifiable proof. This stalemate isn't accidental, it's strategic. Humanity remains deliberately locked within it by the phenomenon's actions. So ironically, it's the ontological stalemate that prepares all of human civilization for a shift beyond comprehension. A shift so profound that you must experience it to understand it. Much like when Neo said to Morpheus, "What truth?" And Morpheus responds, "That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself." How might this ontological stalemate prepare us for our awakening? Simple. It plunges us into an extreme artificial darkness, pulling the wool over our eyes about who we are, what our nature is, and what our capabilities are. UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown alluded to this in this clip.
The secrecy that has been defended is at the cost of, in my mind, human dignity, freedom, and progress. And it is no longer permissible or acceptable in my mind to continue this course, to deprive another generation of not just Americans, but humanity of their birthright to know who they are, where they came from, and what's with us.
It's difficult to know when this darkness started, but in modern history, we can say it began in the 30s and 40s, when it became clear to governments that non-human intelligence was engaging humanity and our planet. As the story goes, and as you know all too well, they decided to keep this reality secret, effectively classifying nature from billions of human beings. In this sense, I would argue that every single one of us has been traveling down a confined trajectory. This confinement has distracted us from deeper truths, our ability to heal ourselves, and to tap into reservoirs within us that we never knew existed. The reason you can't separate UFO intelligence and PSI, is because we and the intelligences behind UFOs are no different. We are all slivers of the infinite light, or God. You could say consciousness is one substance and we each get to embody a piece of it, like a drop of water that's part of the greater ocean. In this way, the ontological stalemate is essentially a preparatory course. By keeping us in the dark for decades, it sets the stage for a revelation of maximum impact. It's the power of contrast. Think of the astronauts who described the overview effect, the profound, life-changing shift that happens when they first see Earth from space. They could have been told 1,000 times that the Earth is fragile, that it is one interconnected whole, but until they saw it against the black void of space, suspended in the infinite darkness beyond our atmosphere, the message never landed with the same force. In the same way, the multi-decade darkness of the ontological stalemate ensures that when disclosure breaks, the contrast between what we thought reality was and what it truly is will be so stark that it will hit us at a soul-deep level, altering the course of civilization. Moses and the Israelites experienced something strikingly similar. Their 40 years in the desert were not merely an inconvenient detour. They were a period of intense preparation. Stripped of the comforts and familiar structures of Egypt, they endured scarcity, uncertainty, and constant testing. This long season of hardship sharpened the contrast between slavery and freedom, between bondage and the promised land. By the time they reached their destination, the shift in circumstances was not just political or geographic. It was spiritual, shaping their identity as a people in a way that an immediate liberation never could have. Likewise, our own prolonged journey through the ontological stalemate is a wilderness of the mind, preparing us to feel the full force of the coming revelation. Part of this shift is the birth of AI. I don't think it's a coincidence that disclosure coming online is happening at the same time AI is coming online. Learning more about who we are is fertile soil for humbling ourselves. And AI will inevitably humble all of us to our very core. Theo Von interviewed Sam Altman, the head of ChatGPT, OpenAI, on July 23rd. And this is what he had to say about AI being smarter than us.
And my kid will never grow up, will never ever be smarter than an AI. That will never happen. Kid born a few years ago, they had a brief period of time. My kid never will be smarter. But also, they'll never know a world where like products and services aren't way smarter than them and super capable. They can just do whatever you need. And in that world, I think education's going to feel very different. I already think college is like maybe not working great for most people. But yeah, I think fast forward 18 years, it's going to look like a very, very different thing.
As AI surpasses human intelligence, helps eradicate disease, and automates many of the jobs we do today, we'll have no choice but to collectively reach for that part of us that is truly special, that part which is eternal and transcendent. Disclosure is the beginning of that. That was a pretty rich essay, if I do say so myself, and I don't even want to tell you what it means. It means whatever you want it to mean, or it means nothing. I would convey that this essay was primarily a thought experiment, an exploration of disclosure. And obviously, there was a lot of speculation embedded in this essay. But I do think it is worthwhile to think about these things. I may feel like there's plausibility here and there, or I may potentially not feel that there's likelihood here and there, but I'm not saying that this is foundational truth. I'm exploring the topic with you. And I can already hear some rebuttals to my essay, and we will go over those. But I'll start with this. If I'm right about UAP, and there is non-human intelligence engaging humanity and the planet, and there is a cover-up, then obviously disclosure is going to be arguably the biggest event in world history. And if you believe in God, regardless of how you believe in God, whether you believe in God through an organized religion, or you believe in God through reading near-death experience literature, or you believe in God as just interpretation by looking at the broader universe, it would insult my intelligence if you maintained that God runs the world, but yet disclosure is not something God is going to use. That would insult my intelligence. Something as tectonic and earth-shaking as disclosure, but it's not important to the divine. It's not important to the creator of the universe. He will not use this as part of our evolution or learning process. That would be, maybe I'm being too harsh, but I would say that I do not understand where you're coming from. You know, a lot of spiritual traditions believe that even on an individual level, when something happens to you, God is teaching you, molding you, and doing what's for your ultimate highest good. But yet you're going to say disclosure somehow does not fall under this umbrella. And we're going to discuss that more later on in this video because I think it's an important topic. Now, when it gets to the cover-up itself, what's so fascinating is apparently there's an organization, if you want to call it that, in the U.S. government called the Collins Elite. And reportedly, they want this whole issue to go away. They perceive it as I understand, antagonistic toward God or satanic. Now, this is beautiful. This is an amazing clip. The following clip is from Salt Eye Connections, New York with Alex Klokas from May 22nd, 2024. Informer Colonel Karl Nell goes into the importance of studying this enigma and casts it as part of the divine orchestration of our mission in this life. And I just absolutely love what he has to say here.
And I know you and I were talking earlier about this idea that in order to really understand the phenomena, it's likely that we have to further our understanding of reality itself. And I guess I'm wondering, I can imagine a future where we acknowledge and we know that there is a higher form of non-human intelligence, yet we still don't truly understand the phenomena. We still don't truly understand reality. And so I guess I'm wondering, do you think that we'll ever truly understand what's going on? Or if part of the game, part of the journey, part of life itself is operating in an environment where at least part of it is fundamentally unknowable to us?
So it's a totally philosophical, epistemological question, right? Really about the nature of knowledge itself, right? Like, how can we know what we know and how can we be sure about what we know? I guess personally, I subscribe to the idea that there is an ultimate truth and that humanity being created in the image of a higher power is endowed with the quality to pursue an understanding of that. And so our part of our objective in this existence is to seek that out and try to understand that ultimate truth to a greater and greater degree. And this would be a component of that, obviously.
Yeah.
So from my interpretation, Karl Nell clearly assesses that we will be able to understand the phenomenon. He doesn't specify how long it will take, but he's clear that we'll be able to understand it. And this is why I interpret that he is communicating, in essence, that disclosure will change everything. Because how could you learn about these other entities, beings, their cultures, where they come from, their biology, their non-biology, if that ends up being the case for some of them, their evolution that led to their developments, why they're here, what their agenda is, what their intentions are? How could you learn all of that and it not change basically the fabric of our experience in terms of all the different topics that we're interested in: science, culture, sociology, history, and so forth. So indeed, I do think that Karl Nell is communicating that disclosure will ultimately change everything. Now, in the following clip from the same interview, former Colonel Karl Nell goes deeper into disclosure, the phenomenon, and how we as a human species factors into that regarding the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have absolute conviction that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet, that there are factions within our own government that know about this, yet we still don't have a plan, and they may represent a security issue. This may pose a threat to humans, yet you still believe that we should disclose. Is that right?
Correct, right. So there's really three reasons that trump all those others. And those others are basically valid, like I said. So the first issue is the moral right. The government exists for and by the people. And so the nature of reality is fundamentally not government information. People have a right to know the world in which we live, and the pursuit of happiness requires that knowledge. So that's sort of the first kind of overarching philosophical foundation for this.
Karl Nell stated, people have a right to know the world in which we live, and the pursuit of happiness requires that knowledge. I couldn't agree more. And I think we don't think deeply enough about that the preventing us from knowing facts about our reality also prevents us from living our lives to our absolute fullest and reaching our fullest potential in a multifaceted amount of ways. Intellectually, spiritually, but I would even argue, as Karl Nell did, from a standpoint of happiness. And I want to build upon what Karl Nell stated there by sharing an article I wrote on X. Some of you may not know, but I have a catalog of articles on my X account. This article was published on June 8th, 2025. You can see the thumbnail, "You Are Not Free," and then the title, "You've Been Lied to About UFOs and It Changed Everything." Let's begin. You have no clue what decisions you would have made had you not been born into the UFO cover-up. Both the phenomenon and special interests have reality tunneled your perception. Who you're married to, your spiritual and religious beliefs, your perception of the universe and science, all of these have been irrevocably influenced by the cover-up. You are not nearly as free as you think. Your life trajectory would be different if you weren't living in this artificial construct, one that shields you from something as transformative as whether you're alone in the universe. And the answer to that question would inevitably reveal other deeper truths, truths incidentally withheld as a byproduct of never having known it. Even those additional truths would reshape your life and trajectory in ways you can't yet envision. When you suppress a truth as fundamental as whether we are alone, you're not just withholding a single fact, you're altering the architecture of meaning itself. Every framework you use to interpret the world, religious, scientific, philosophical, is built on sand. The stories we tell, the ambitions we form, the relationships we pursue, they all anchor themselves to what we think reality is. If you warp that foundation even slightly, the entire trajectory of human behavior shifts with it. In short, the cover-up has kept a cosmic domino from falling, one that would expand humanity at the most fundamental level. And yet we collectively go about our day oblivious to this truth as we buy our carrots at the supermarket. This is a level of madness that you almost have to respect. Wake up and smell the matrix. And then I have a nice little thumbnail at the bottom that says, "You know what?" One of the biggest rebuttals to my essay go something like this. Someone would say, look, you've painted this picture that a time is coming when disclosure happens and the whole world knows that the universe is far more complicated and there are different life forms engaging humanity, and that will be a major sea change within the human psyche. But hold on now, before the Enlightenment, most of the world had all kinds of weird beliefs. There were shamans that people prayed and all this, and people perceived reality through a more supernatural lens, if you will. Beautifully, former Colonel Karl Nell rebuts that for me, and I think this pushes back very effectively to that perspective. Because the scientific method is new. Science is a way for humans to know things in a more verifiable way than simply belief. Because even thousands of years ago, not everyone, I'm sure, had direct experiences with the supernatural necessarily. We don't have that now. I don't think we had it then. So that's how disclosure would be completely different, where there would be no parallel. It could be argued. Disclosure makes what was believed or perceived as fantasy or science fiction, it makes it real within consensus reality. Not on a belief level, not on a spirituality level, but it makes it experiential for all 8 billion of us. I don't think that has ever been replicated, at least not in recorded history. And so that's why this will truly represent a shift that has never occurred. At least we could argue that, right? This is an incredibly complicated issue that I think someone like James Iandoli would be better to broach this than me. But let's hear what Karl Nell has to say about it.
Are you implying that perhaps we as a society may not be ready for disclosure? Or are you saying that we may not be able to defend ourselves against this other force?
So there's sort of different viewpoints on, whether people are ready to, deal with this phenomenon. And, popular culture is kind of infused with this stuff. Roswell became a meme a long time ago. We got programs on Ancient Aliens, Skinwalker Ranch, all this stuff. I guess I would draw an analogy, though, for people that believe in a certain faith tradition, whatever that faith tradition is, and hold to that and subscribe to that in a very serious and devout way, and sort of pose the question, even for folks of that ilk, and I would count myself as one, if you're confronted with the reality of your religious belief system, like the reality of the metaphysical, an angel, a messenger from God, what have you, that's going to be a sea state change in your way of dealing with reality, right? Even though you already believe it, right? So it's one thing to believe and it's another to know. And I think in this context, this phenomena has the potential for an analogous effect, both on the individual and on society.
That was such a rich and important statement by Karl Nell that I'm going to repeat a segment of it, and then I'm going to give you my commentary. He stated, if you're confronted with the reality of your religious belief system, like the reality of the metaphysical angel, a messenger from God, what have you, that's going to be a sea state change in your way of dealing with reality, even though you already believe it. So it's one thing to believe and it's another to know. And I think in this context, this phenomena has the potential for an analogous effect, both on the individual and on society. That is such an interesting context that Karl Nell brought to the table. It's almost like disclosure is this giant lamp or spotlight that shines upon humanity and says, wake up, wake up. There is more to this world than your institutions have been analyzing and contending with and talking about and studying. It's like the wake up spotlight that shines brilliant light over the earth, over all of humanity. And isn't, if there is a cover up and if we are being engaged by non-human intelligences, isn't that 100% true? And this kind of goes back into what I was saying earlier. How could you look at disclosure and separate it from God's plan and working through civilization? It doesn't make sense. Now, I'm not telling religious people how to interpret disclosure within the framework of their religious framework. I mean, I'm not here to get people to believe what I believe. I'm here to contribute to the marketplace of ideas, and people can take it or leave it, but I'm not here to grow alignment with my perspective. We live in a pluralistic society, and I want it to stay that way. But I do think it's from a spiritual and evolutionary context, disclosure is profound. And I do think he will open us up to the greater universe, the greater spiritual reality. And part of that is because, one, we don't know if UFO intelligence is completely physical. There might be elements of it that are more exotic than that. And two, even the elements that are likely creatures from other places, they seem to be able to do things that we, in our current state of evolution, are not able to do. And if you read the historical record, you come away with that very quickly. And so we, as a civilization, we will have to contend with that. You know, all the stories of telepathy, people receiving telepathic messages, beings floating. A lot of that might be technology, but you know, maybe when you get to such an advanced state, technology and deeper truth start to blur into one in some way. The technologies maybe reveal deeper truths about the nature of reality, the non-localness of consciousness, and so forth. So disclosure, we could say, is a wake-up call for humanity. And it's really interesting when you think about it, because you know, we're just starting to be technological. I had a video where I went into all of this with great detail, and I wish I remembered. I basically was saying, how old is the computer? How old are cars? How old are planes? I don't remember the exact dates, and I'm not going to go look it up for this video, but I'll just say planes, computers, iPhones. iPhones are very recent, right? Our little pocket computers, very recent. Computers are very recent, not as recent as iPhones. Cars are recent. Planes are recent. The Wright brothers discovered flight not that long ago. So we are a infant civilization. We go back, you know, modern humans go back 200,000 to 300,000 years. And that's not trivial, and I grant that. But for 200,000 or 300,000 years, we didn't have computers. We didn't have iPhones or mobile phones. We didn't have cars. We didn't have planes. And so we're kind of just, we are literally just kind of coming on to that scene. And so let's look at it this way. Is it a coincidence that disclosure is about to happen in this age? When modern humanity has been around for 200,000 to 300,000 years, and the modern human has been around, yeah, there were other species of humans too, that's true. But regardless, modern humans have been around for 200,000 to 300,000 years. There was like, some people might think that we had contact long ago with non-human intelligences. Maybe we did, but I think that might be speculative. I don't know what kind of evidence we have for that. But if you believe that the divine guides evolution and has his fingerprints in the trajectory of the human experience, then disclosure is anything but just something that's just kind of happening and out of some kind of mass chaos. No, there's something to this, in my opinion. It's too important. It's too influential for it not to be connected to the divine, if you believe that kind of thing, which I'm among that ilk, as Karl Nell might put it. I loved how he said that. But from my perception, disclosure is an evolutionary primer. And I don't know what the non-human intelligences think. Do they know that they're priming us? Maybe, but it wouldn't really matter, because God can work through his creation, whether the creation knows what it's doing or not. So this is a really interesting tweet by Kelly Chase. She's doing a quote tweet for a tweet that says, "Dipping sheep in a solution of pesticides known as sheep dip is a common method for controlling external parasites like blowflies, lice, ticks, and sheep scab." So Kelly commentates on that and writes, "I'll never be dismissive of the UFOs, NHIs, or angels and demons conversation, because angels and demons are words imbued with a rich cultural, historical, and religious meaning related to humanity's ongoing contact with these phenomena. I think we deny the relevance of those terms for our own comfort and ultimately to our own detriment. That said, though, angels and demons can be useful terms. Those concepts don't go far enough in terms of explanatory power. They fail to recognize the potential scale and complexity of a situation in which we are embedded in a dense ecology of other intelligences, many of which may regard themselves to be more advanced, morally superior, or more conscious than us. To animals like these sheep, we are demons. How would we experience an intelligence that saw us like sheep? So I really like this sentiment by Kelly, and I think it perfectly expands upon this video, because I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm saying the non-human intelligences are our space brothers and that they're all altruistic, because that's kind of a binary perspective, and I think Karl Nell even said that perspective is naive in the interview we've been covering. It's not necessarily about good or bad. It's much more complex than that. I think non-human intelligences are capable of believing they're doing the right thing when they're doing something that's not so right, in the same way that humans are capable of thinking we are capable of thinking we're doing the right thing when maybe it's not so right. Right? I think that's something about the physical domain is we ultimately have to contend with our biology. And our biology is susceptible to error. And maybe if this is true, when our consciousness moves on beyond our physical biology, discernment becomes more clear, and it's harder to fall into biases that are self-serving and bad for others. I don't know. We're exploring. But her sentiment really just underscores the complexity of disclosure. The conversation that is going to be opened up is going to be far beyond craft and aliens. It's going to begin to encompass, as Kelly put it, a dense ecology of other intelligences, many of which may regard themselves to be more advanced, morally superior, or more conscious than us. And frankly, some of them probably are morally superior to us in some ways. Like some of these civilizations may have stopped engaging in war, where we are chin deep in tribal warfare. But that doesn't mean that they're perfectly moral. After all, you can look at the abduction issue. I'm not sure if there is some kind of final ultimate truth that falls under the umbrella of fair game, that might have self-serving qualities entwined with it. And I don't think we can just say, yeah, abductions are fine. They're smarter than us. They're more advanced than us. So it's totally fine moralistically. I don't know. That might be a stretch. That very well may be a stretch. And from our perspective, it certainly is a stretch. And maybe from a deeper ultimate truth level, it's also a stretch. But disclosure is about complexity. And unfortunately, there are UFO gurus who make disclosure very simplistic. And they make the phenomenon very simplistic. And they get into binary perspectives like, well, it's all good. These are all angelic, every single one of them. Or it's all bad. These are all demonic, every single one of them. And I would caution the religious community from doing that, from saying it's all demonic. And I wonder if part of the motivation to do that is because you're fearful that disclosure is going to draw attention away from your religion and put it onto the ecology of other intelligences. And I would say, look, why are you trying to control the world? Is it because you believe you have the truth? And you think the world is going in a bad direction if we don't all line up and agree with your perspective? Okay. I don't resonate with that, and I don't know how well that's going to survive in a post-disclosure world. You would be amazed how our perceptions of reality might shift in a post-disclosure world. Our sense of conviction and certainty might not have the same kind of groundwork to flourish in a post-disclosure world that it has now. We may not feel the compulsion that we feel now to get everyone to believe what we do in a post-disclosure world, because a post-disclosure world changes the playing field. And when you have a different playing field, you operate differently. And I know that there are people who are very committed to their spiritual pathway that are going to disagree with me because they don't want that to be true, right? They want the whole world to eventually believe what they believe. They want plurality to completely disappear in the name of truth, in the name of divine truth. But from my perspective, and yes, I'm biased, just as everybody else is, there's not that much beauty to that. So the rebuttal to that, well, it's divine truth. Do you want people being led astray? Do you want people going down the wrong paths? How dare you? But it's like, well, the divine has allowed this to happen for 200,000 to 300,000 years. So why would it become such a big issue 200 or 300,000 years later? Maybe there are deeper truths that transcend religious dogma. How you perceive God, what holidays you follow, deeper truths that are more universal. And so the rebuttal to that is, yeah, but then you get to pick your own rules and laws, and you get to create your own morality. And my rebuttal to that is, yeah, but what good is your morality that's fixed in stone if it's not completely correct, which I don't believe it's likely is. Right? So the whole idea of, well, you have to have a religion because otherwise you're just going to pick and choose whatever you want to believe in terms of how to behave. On the surface, that sounds very persuasive, but it crumbles under the prospect that their religion also isn't perfect. I mean, I hate to remind people, but not too long ago, slavery was pretty universal. And religion, many religions allowed it and regulated it, as opposed to had a verse that said something like, it'd be a good idea to move away from slavery. So who's to say there's not other areas of biblical or religious texts that maybe don't ultimately fulfill the divine's will? I think it's possible. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'm not here. I'm here to contribute to the marketplace of ideas. But either way, I'm also here to learn from all religions. Religions are beautiful. I feel like I can learn from every religion. Religions have wonderful teachings and very advanced spiritual perspectives and practices. So I'm not here to denigrate religion. I'm only here to suggest it's possible that in a post-disclosure world, it might be a little more psychologically difficult to be so convinced that you have all the answers, when all of a sudden you're inundated with the knowledge that there's an ecology of other intelligences. And then the natural question emerges, if there are, let's say theoretically, or potentially there are billions of civilizations in the world, who has the right doctrine? And what if their miracles are more profound and have more witnesses than our miracles? Why would we commit to the religious texts associated with our miracles when their miracles are more compelling? I don't know. And I'm not asking anyone to drop their religion. I'm only saying that from my subjective perspective, a post-disclosure world might make certainty less conducive. That's all I'm saying. But does it really matter? I don't have the final say on what disclosure is going to lead to. I could be wrong about everything. Disclosure will reveal itself. The only thing I can say with great confidence is that it will be profound, that it will wake us up out of a slumber, even if the slumber is mundane, and we don't even have to go spiritual. The slumber could simply be scientific. We assumed that we were the only ones. We assumed that consciousness was local, and those assumptions will have to be looked at again. It could be that simple. or it could go further than that. The post-disclosure world is uncharted territory. And if we are here to live during it, consider yourself extremely likely, regardless of what you believe or what you don't believe. Consider this a blessing from the divine as far as I'm concerned. And maybe that's what we should focus on. We should focus on it as a blessing of the divine. And if you don't believe in the divine, which is totally cool, because I don't know for certainty the divine exists, then you can perceive it as pure luck and fortune to be here with something so profound. And, I take it for granted. I do take it for granted. I don't think deeply enough about it. And of course, I could be wrong, right? I could just be like this crazy person on YouTube speaking nonsense, right? Maybe I'm completely wrong about the UFO issue. Totally possible. Totally possible. I strive to have epistemological humility because it's what I believe is the right thing to do. But from my vantage point, from my intellectual analysis, I do think we are not alone. I think the historical record going back 70 years makes that clear, and it makes it very likely that we're not alone. And I think government antics and the way they've dealt with this issue makes it very likely that they've been covering it up. And so I do, and I don't know if we'll get disclosure in our lifetime, but I've always been optimistic on that we will. And I think that's legitimate. I think that's valid. I don't think every YouTube channel has to be pessimistic about it. Because if we all are focusing in the same way, doesn't that become monotonous? Not to mention, I do think there are compelling and objective reasons why there is a good shot we're going to get disclosure. And we'll be covering that in future videos as new developments occur. Now, I was just talking recently on with a few of my colleagues, and I told them that, look, Vice President J.D. Vance very recently said he's obsessed with UFOs and he wants to get to the bottom of it. Was that performative? I don't know. I'm not a mind reader, but still, I think that is that reveals the sea change we are experiencing. So I don't think it's totally naive to say we might get disclosure in our lifetimes when you just had the vice president saying that he is obsessed with UFOs. That has never happened before in the history of the United States, as far as I know. The U.S. government has never released gun camera footage of UFOs. That happened in 2017, excuse me. And as James Fox is very fond of saying, we've gotten more UFO hearings in the past few years than in the past 50. So I do think we're in an accelerated trajectory. I don't think there's any question about that. I would never say we are 100% definitely going to get disclosure in our lifetimes. But do I think we will? Yeah, I think we will. And I think it's going to be amazing. And I think the world needs it. I think it will upgrade Earth. I think it will complicate Earth. I think it will complicate everything, but it will also be beautiful. It would be like, here's a metaphor that I'll throw at you. Imagine you're walking through a forest, beautiful trees, and then you're walking and suddenly the landscape completely changes and you're in the middle of a tropical rainforest with thousands of different flower species and tree species, and there's primates hooting and hollering all around you, and parrots are talking, and you can hear jaguars roaring, and it's like you've just found yourself in this ecological powerhouse. That's disclosure. Disclosure changes everything. And with that, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it if you would. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon. You could check out my YouTube members, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. And all of those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below. See you in the next episode, baby. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.